Welcome back to Smarty Van. Today we are just outside Mount Rainier National Park, and usually we're going to talk about home automation in a van, but occasionally we're going to give you a glimpse into our build. I'm Mike, and this is my partner Char.
That's me.
And we live in our 2022 4x4 Sprinter that we built from the ground up as a DIY home automated home on wheels.
We've been getting a lot of questions about our Terrazzo countertops and shower walls, so we wanted to take you inside to take a look and talk a little bit about how we made them.
Let's get to work.
Welcome to our kitchen. Here we have our infamous Terrazzo countertop. We both love the look of Terrazzo, and since we designed our van to have a fairly large countertop, we wanted something that was going to be much lighter and also durable. While we certainly did not invent this method, we wanted to share with you the process that we came up with to hopefully inspire you to create this in your van as well. All right, let's get into the process. Step 1. Make a cardboard template of your surface, including any fixtures like your sink, your faucet, your stovetop, and then taking note of any edges that will ultimately be exposed when you're finished. Step 2. Transfer your template onto your substrate. We decided to use 1/2-inch Baltic birch. We love the durability, and we knew it wouldn't warp given all of the attachment points that we'll ultimately use. Then sand and clean the plywood. We chose to round off all the edges that would be exposed. When we pour the epoxy, it'll help it flow over these edges that are going to be showing. Also, definitely helps not to have sharp edges in places where you're going to be walking. All right, step 3, seal the substrate. So we chose to use a Sherwin Williams urethane primer as a first layer defense against any moisture. Step 4 is to prepare your work area. When working with epoxy, you want to keep a few things in mind, like making sure your work surface is level. The climate is controlled around 70 degrees for the epoxy that we used. Also, an area where you can limit debris and dust from settling while it cures. Step number 5, paint the substrate and place the Jesmonite chips. So this is probably the most fun part of the project. We painted the countertop with this base color that you see here. It's an off-white urethane color from Sherwin Williams. While the paint is still wet, we sprinkled on some of these Jesmonite chips, placed a lot of these by hand just to make sure that we like the distribution. We found that taking some of the smaller pieces and sprinkling them from high above was a really good tactic because it helped to evenly distribute them and you didn't have these big clumps. On the edges that are going to be exposed, we also manually placed the chips here. It's important to place the chips while the paint is wet. That way it'll dry in place, kind of acts as an adhesive so that when we pour the epoxy, the chips don't move around. Step 6 is to create a tape dam on all the edges that are not going to be exposed. When you pour the epoxy, it's not going to pour over those edges and change the dimensions of your countertop. The only areas we had to do it were back here and these little cutouts here where we had the 80/20. Step 7, time to pour the epoxy. We chose to use a 2-part art epoxy with UV resistance. This is where it helps to have 2 sets of hands if you've got them. While I mixed the epoxy, Mike was pouring it over our surface. Again, this is where it's really important that your surface is level since epoxy is self-leveling. When pouring epoxy, it's natural for air bubbles to form, so we used a heat gun about 6 to 8 inches from the surface and worked the heat gun back and forth until all the air bubbles were gone. Step 8, sanding. When epoxy cures, it has a glossy finish. We prefer more of a matte finish, so we took an orbital sander with a 220 grit across the entire surface, which also helped to level out any of the inconsistencies and any Jesmonite chips that may have been sticking out, because they do have a little bit of thickness to them. Step 9, apply a second coat. The first sanding will reveal some of the Jesmonite chips that were sticking out, so we needed to apply another layer to seal in everything to make it more waterproof. We chose to use a marine grade varnish that also had UV protection, and then we sanded that back down to matte. step 10 is the fit and finish. We used an orbital sander on the underside of the countertop to remove any of the epoxy drips that may have formed, especially in this area where we needed the sink to mount flush with the countertops. All right, and to finish it off, you would install this just as you would any other countertop in a kitchen. In our case, we use threaded inserts on the bottom to attach to the 80/20 aluminum framing, and along the back here, an almond color, just as you would in any kitchen. So there you have it. That's how we made our faux razzo countertop. Let us know if you decide to do this yourself, or if you have any questions, we will do our best to answer.
All right, if you like that, then you're really gonna love what we did in the shower, also epoxy. There's a few tweaks to the process, but it's pretty similar. Let us know in the comments if you wanna hear more about it. We'll leave links in the description below for all the products we use for the kitchen, as well as some useful guides, and we'll be back next time with more home automation in a van. Until next time, safe travels.